reality check for John Swinney.
Yeah.
Last year, my party revealed that Social Security Scotland had referred just 29 cases of potential fraud to the Crown Office. And on the basis of fraud across the United Kingdom, that number should be in the thousands. And today we can reveal another shocking fact. Under the SNP's new benefit system, just three people have been convicted for fraud-related offences since 2022. Out of almost 1 million people claiming benefits in Scotland, just 3 people. Unbelievable. And on the basis of our evidence, does John Swinney agree that the SNP has effectively decriminalised benefit fraud in Scotland?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I reiterate what I've said in my answer to Mr Findlay's second question, that the system is working because investigations take place where they are required and there is a robust assessment process in place. What, of course, this is cover for Mr Findlay is his desire to take benefits away from vulnerable people in our society. It's the fault line that's in the system that's here. That Russell Findlay and the Tories, with the restoration of the proper credentials of the nasty party of Scottish politics, are going after vulnerable people in our society. Well, my party is not going to do that.
Russell Findlay.
I remember the old John Swinney who preached about being respectful in here. Well, the mask has again slipped back to the angry old John Swinney who resorts to silly smears. He still doesn't get it.
Let us hear one another.
He still doesn't get it. The party of gravy bus grifters and camper van capers. They mug their own members. They rob the taxpayers of Scotland. They've built a benefit system that shouts free money here. Yeah. It is a charter for chancers. Yeah. Every other party backs the SNP's out-of-control benefit spending. But the Scottish Conservatives will keep telling the truth. It's unaffordable, it's unfair and it's unsustainable. We've set out a sensible plan to tackle fraud and to reduce the £7 billion and rising benefits bill. Mr Swinney can posture all he wants, but surely he can now see that the benefit system is completely and utterly broken.
First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, I'm always respectful in my engagement in Parliament. I just will not apologise for setting out some hard truths to the Tory party. And of course, I didn't conjure up the description of the Tory party as the nasty party. That was conjured up and stated openly by Theresa May, the former Conservative Prime Minister, who in a moment of self-reflection told the Conservatives what they need to hear. And of course, there's been a resumption of the nasty party under the leadership of Russell Findlay. Now, just one illustration of the characteristics of Mr Findlay's plan demonstrates that if his plan was implemented, there would be the restoration of the two-child limit on the Scottish Child Payment. And what that would do is consign more families and more children to poverty in this country. And one of my objectives as First Minister is to make sure we succeed in eradicating child poverty. We are already making significant progress where there is a reduction in child poverty in Scotland when it is rising in the rest of the United Kingdom. Next week, the Social Justice Secretary will set out to Parliament the next steps in tackling child poverty, and this government is going to succeed in its determination to eradicate child poverty and consign the Tory party to electoral history in Scotland.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week in this chamber, John Swinney shamefully turned his back on families impacted by the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital scandal. Later today, he will finally meet them on an online team call. I hope he will take the opportunity to apologise to them. Last week, he said he couldn't set up an independent expert panel to answer families' questions because there was a public inquiry. Not for the first time, misleading this Parliament and hiding behind the inquiry when it suits him. He knows the inquiry is not looking at individual cases and therefore will not give those families the answers they deserve. In NHS Tayside, there is a public inquiry into the El Jamel scandal, alongside an expert panel looking at individual cases. So what he said last week is just not true. So will he now accept he was wrong and commit to that independent expert panel?
First Minister.
The first thing I want to say to Mr Sarwar is that there was no disrespect offered by me to families last week. I was simply sitting in my chair looking at Mr Sarwar answering his questions, and that's my duty to answer questions, and I did that, and I simply say to Mr Sarwar, I give that matter my attention when I'm answering questions in Parliament. The second question that Mr Sarwar puts to me is about any scrutiny of individual cases. And Mr Sarwar, from my recollection of what he said to me, misrepresents what I said to Parliament last week. Not, of course, for the first time. What I said to Mr Sarwar last week is I would have to consider the question of looking at individual cases. I did not at any stage rule it out. So Mr Sarwar, once again, has misrepresented me in this chamber, and it's up to me to correct him for that purpose. Now, in 2020, the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport commissioned a case note review which was undertaken by a panel of independent experts. So some of this work has already been undertaken. The review was led by Professor Michael Stevens and looked at 118 episodes of bacterial infection in 85 children who received treatment for blood disease, cancer or related conditions at the Royal Hospital for Children, and it published its findings in 2021. So that exercise has been done on a large number of cases. If there are more cases that are to be examined, then, as I said last week, I will consider that question. But I have to consider that mindful of the fact that there is now a public inquiry underway looking at all of these questions. But I reiterate to Mr Sarwar, at no stage last week did I rule out that possibility, and he should stop misrepresenting me in this chamber.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, to be frank, patients and families will see right through the nonsense of John Swinney, because they've heard it for 8 years. And this is not the only occasion John Swinney has misled this Parliament. He's done it for weeks in relation to safety issues at the hospital right now. Yet again, it has taken whistleblowers and journalists to reveal that infection risks to immunocompromised patients has led to 2 wards partially being closed. And he doesn't want to hear it from me, so perhaps he'll listen to the words of the grieving widow, Louise Lawrence. It beggars belief that as this incident was ongoing, the Health Board, the First Minister and the Health Secretary were publicly proclaiming the hospital was safe. As the leading expert states, 4B is not safe and nobody should be saying it is. Patients like Andrew remain at risk today simply because those responsible prioritise reputation over patient safety. Shame on each and every single one of you. Public safety and patient reassurance is urgent. It requires honesty and transparency. This Parliament voted 3 weeks ago for all these documents to be published, and they have not been. So will he stop hiding behind process and do it right now?
First Minister.
Well, let me address the issues that Mr Sarwar puts to me. The first thing is to say that last week I met with some of the families involved in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, and this afternoon I will meet with many more as part of that conversation, and they will have my attention and my engagement on all of these issues. Now, Mr Sarwar asked me for transparency on these issues, and I want to be crystal clear with Parliament. The Government received an Amber Hayat alert on Thursday, the 26th of February, last Thursday, regarding Ward 4B at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. The ward cares for bone marrow transplant patients. This morning, the Government was advised that that Hayat alert was upgraded to red. Now, the issue that has made the difference between the Amber alert and the red alert is there's only one factor of difference, and that is the upgrading of one aspect of the Hayat assessment tool, which is to acknowledge the heightened public anxiety around this matter. It is not due to any increased risk of harm to patients. So it's important that I put that on the record, that fundamentally the clinical consensus is that the wards in question are safe, and I reiterate that. That point of that view, that I consider the hospital and its component parts to be safe, because where there are issues identified openly and transparently, NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde are addressing those issues, and they will be required by the government to do exactly that. And that's exactly what the Health Secretary has been engaging with the Health Board about, and that's what I expect them to undertake in the period to come.
Anna Sarwar.
In that answer, John Swinney reveals the inconsistency at the heart of this government. 14 amber and red warnings were received by the government before March 2018, and they still took no action and denied there were infection risks at the hospital. He now admits that amber and red warnings come to the government. So why were they ignored before 2018 and people died as a result? Every step of the way, this SNP government has attempted to misinform, deflect and deny. Progress has only ever been made when they've been backed into a corner. And even now, they hide behind process rather than just tell the truth. So let's look at what's been established over the last few weeks. We now know political pressure was applied to open a hospital before it was ready and safe, and people died as a result. I would suggest to Shona Robertson, she was the Health Secretary. She should perhaps reflect on her own decisions and what happened. We know repeated warnings of infections were ignored. We know staff were bullied and attempts made to silence them. We know grieving families were offered bribes in exchange for their silence. And we know, despite all of this, even now the truth is denied and the hospital has not been validated. Families don't trust him, and he won't release the papers this Parliament has demanded that he must. So why is John Swinney incapable of doing the right thing by these families when it comes to this hospital?
First Minister.
I completely reject that charge. Completely and utterly reject that charge. And in relation to grieving families, I will meet grieving families this afternoon, as I indicated I would do, just as I met families last week, just as I have met in my constituency capacities victims of the El Jamel situation, and I met them as First Minister on Monday. In relation to the question of releasing papers, my understanding is that the papers that were considered by NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board have been made publicly available, which addresses the issue Mr Sarwar is putting to me. If there are any documents that he believes have not been released that the government committed to doing so, he should advise me as to what those documents are, because my understanding is that those documents have been put in the public domain. We've established an oversight group which involves representatives of families, chaired by the Chief Executive of NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and also by Sir Lewis Ritchie, an eminent clinician, to make sure there is external interrogation of the issues from NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And on the question of openness, I have just put on the record today the most recent information that is available to me. I could not be any more open with Parliament on this question, based on the information that I have available to me. So, and also, let me add that the government has established a public inquiry that will consider all of these issues, and we await the findings of Lord Brodie. So what I would say to Anna Sarwar at this particular moment is the government recognises the concern, the deep concern of families. That is being addressed by the steps that we're taking, and that will continue to reflect the position of my government.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. Flight data shows that in the week leading up to the US and Israeli attack on Iran, 24 US military aircraft landed at Prestwick Airport, some of which came directly from Israel. That's a significant increase in American military activity at an airport owned by the Scottish Government. We now know this was in preparation for their bombing campaign against Iran. Trump and Netanyahu are not liberating the Iranian people from their brutal regime by murdering their children, as they did when they killed dozens of little girls in a Tehran school shortly after they arrived for school on Saturday. The Israeli military is rightly banned from using Prestwick Airport because of their genocidal assault on Palestine. The First Minister said that America and Israel's attack on Iran is not compatible with the international rules-based system. In other words, it is illegal under international law. So surely he will now ban the American military from using Prestwick Airport.
First Minister.
President Officer, let me reiterate what I've said publicly on this issue, that I cannot see how the intervention by the United States and Israel is compatible with an international rules-based system. And the implications of this are now being felt very directly by our own citizens, many of whom are stranded in the Middle East. And the position that the Prime Minister finds himself in of having to address the security implications for our citizens as a consequence of the American and Israeli action demonstrates how these issues can escalate out of control very, very quickly indeed and pose direct risks to our citizens. So I am concerned for the well-being of Scottish citizens who are trapped in the Middle East, and we are working with the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office to try to seek the repatriation of those individuals as quickly as it is safe to do so, given the risks and the threats that are faced. Now, in relation to the question of the use of Prestwick Airport, the Government is in the process of establishing clarity around the use by the American Air Force of Prestwick Airport. That is a process of inquiry that is underway, and obviously when the Government has more to say on that question, we will share that with Parliament.
Ross Greer.
The First Minister is right that America's attack on Iran is incompatible with international law. But he's now seeking an answer that we already have about US use of Prestwick Airport. We can see the flight data. We see the flights between Prestwick Airport and Israel by the US military. It's abundantly obvious what they're doing. Spain, a fellow NATO member, has now banned the US military from using their air bases. Their Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, said, "You can be against a hateful regime and at the same time against an unjustified and dangerous military intervention that is outside of international law." I believe the First Minister agrees with that statement. It's very similar to statements he made when he marched against the war against Iraq in 2003. The US is using an airport owned by the Scottish Government to wage an illegal war, killing hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent people. But at the moment, Scotland's First Minister is sitting on his hands. This government says it stands up for Scotland. Why does that stop the moment it might involve Donald Trump? Why won't the First Minister kick Trump's troops out of Prestwick Airport immediately?
First Minister.
I think it's pretty clear from what I've said over the last few days that I am in no way, shape or form a supporter of what has happened in the course of the last few days. No way, shape or form, and no amount of the characterisation of my stance that Mr Greer has put on the record will demonstrate that to be the case. Now, I am taking the steps within government to establish the detail around about the use of Prestwick Airport. When the government has more to say to Parliament about that, we will do so. But let me reiterate that I believe the intervention by Israel and the United States is incompatible with the international rules-based system, and that has been the position of my government and will continue to be so.
Question number 4, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the UK Government's Spring Statement.
First Minister.
President Officer, the UK Spring Statement provided an update on the various issues in relation to the economic situation. We had hoped there would be a clear outcome from the Spring Statement in relation to the Energy Profits Levy, with an immediate end to that profits levy, given the damage that has been done to the North Sea sector as a consequence. We received additional consequential information from the United Kingdom Government, which will be spread over a 3-year period, beginning with 26-27, which represents additional funding of less than half of 1% of the budget over a 3-year period.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the First Minister for that reply. UK economic growth forecasts have been revised downwards to lower than in the last year of the Tories. Does the First Minister agree that the Spring Statement was a missed opportunity to abolish an energy profits levy that's costing 1,000 jobs each month in the North Sea at a time of fuel insecurity, remove increased employers' national insurance contributions, which have hit the low-paid businesses and cost 200,000 jobs, and finally deliver justice to 3.6 million WASPy women betrayed by the UK Labour Government? And does he agree it's no wonder that, bereft of any vision for Scotland, the best election slogan Labour can contrive is "Hold your nose and vote Labour"?
On devolved competence, First Minister.
On the issues that are associated with the Spring Statement, I am still unable to understand how the UK Government can reconcile their supposed enthusiasm for growth within the economy with the increase in employers' national insurance contributions, which is so obviously damaging employment growth within many parts of the United Kingdom. But thankfully, because of the steps of my government, unemployment is at a very low level compared to the rest of the United Kingdom. I would have wanted the Chancellor's statement to address the energy profits levy that's costing 1,000 jobs each month in the North Sea at a time of fuel insecurity. So the challenges that we face in Scotland have not been assisted by the stance taken by the United Kingdom Government in the Spring Statement, but we will work to ensure that at all times we continue to protect and promote the interests of the people of Scotland. And Mr Gibson's characterisation of the dynamic election campaign of the Labour Party, which has gone from voting for Labour for change to holding your nose to vote Labour, just tells us what we all knew a long time ago. It stinks to vote Labour.
Question number 6. Stephen Kerr.
To ask the First Minister, in light of the recently published Commission on School Reform Manifesto warning that the Curriculum for Excellence has been poorly implemented and is harming long-term prospects, what the Scottish Government's position is on whether a lack of clear, nationally specified curriculum content and standards has contributed to declining attainment and inconsistency across Scotland's schools.
First Minister.
President Officer, Scottish education continues to perform well, with record levels of literacy and numeracy, a record low in the poverty-related attainment gap in primary schools, and a near-record number of young people entering positive destinations. The Government has sought, at the encouragement of the Commission on School Reform, an assessment of Curriculum for Excellence from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. That review indicated that Curriculum for Excellence was the correct approach. Work to update the curriculum, ensuring strong alignment between the broad general education and the senior phase, is underway, and I take the view that these reforms are essential to ensure the continued success of our education system.
Stephen Kerr.
Well, it's the usual self-congratulation from John Swinney. He can't have read the OECD review of 2021 if that's what he thinks the sum content of that review was. Teachers have been warning for years that the Curriculum for Excellence is no longer fit for purpose. It's weakened the emphasis on subject knowledge, created inconsistency between schools, and has coincided with Scotland falling behind international competitors. The OECD review in 2021, 5 years ago, warned that there was an insufficient clarity about what pupils should learn, how standards should be measured, yet all these years on, the SNP government have done nothing. Will the First Minister now accept that his government bears responsibility for the erosion of Scotland's once world-leading education system and set out what action must now be taken to restore clear standards, strong knowledge foundations and consistent expectations across Scotland's schools? First Minister.
I don't accept that characterisation of Scottish education. Attainment levels are a record high in literacy and numeracy as a consequence of the commitment this government has given to the Scottish Attainment Challenge. The poverty-related attainment gap across both primary and secondary in literacy and numeracy are at record lows. We are seeing in the delivery of Scottish education improved examination results, which were demonstrated by the exam results in August of 2025, showing the strength of Scottish education. And in terms of the action the Government has taken action to address the issues from the OECD in relation to curriculum content. And any curriculum has got to be founded. And if Mr Kerr doesn't realise that the curriculum is a knowledge-based curriculum that equips young people with the skills for the 21st century, then he's not been paying attention to the contents of Scottish education. And when I'm engaged with Scottish education, the length and breadth of the country, I see a strong education system with outstanding young people, with a record number of achievements being made in our schools, and I'm proud of the strength of Scottish education.
Question number 6, Katie Clark.
To ask the First Minister, in light of the theme of this year's International Women's Day being equal rights and equal justice, what action the Scottish Government is taking to improve the legal rights of women and girls.
First Minister.
So the Scottish Government is strengthening the rights of women and girls. I'm committed to ensuring people are protected from abuse, which is why we are introducing new protections for women and girls via the hate crime legislation, and are consulting on other new protections, such as the banning the creation of deepfake images. Significant reforms have also recently been introduced. For example, the establishment of a sexual offences court, providing victims of sexual offences with an automatic lifelong right of anonymity, and providing women with the ability to seek protection from abuse by removing the abuser from their home.
Katie Clark.
A number of women members have raised with the First Minister the financial problems being raised by rape crisis centres, who provide a range of practical and legal services to women. The 3 rape crisis centres, including the Star Centre, which provides services in Ayrshire, have spoken about significant real terms cuts, and Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis have closed 2 of its waiting lists. The First Minister has said that there are active discussions with ministers. As we approach International Women's Day, will the First Minister give a commitment that there will be no cuts so that services provided by rape crisis centres can continue?
First Minister.
Well, I want to reassure Katie Clark that the Government wants to put in place appropriate funding for rape crisis centres around the country. We are providing a 5% uplift to the Delivering Equally Safe Fund, bringing the total investment in the fund to almost £46 million over 26 to 28. Now, Katie Clark also raised with me the issues in relation to Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis Centre, and improvements to the funding position have been put in place there, as they also have been put in place in relation to the Star Centre in Ayrshire, which she raised with me. So I hope that provides the reassurance that the Government wishes to adequately and effectively fund the network of rape crisis centres around the country.
Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's scandalous that the SNP government has spent millions of funding the same self-ID groups while shutting sex-based women's organisations out of public funding. Ahead of International Women's Day, will the First Minister commit to finally opening the Equally Safe and Equality and Human Rights funds to fair and open competition?
First Minister.
The Government sets out to Parliament the investment that we're making. I've set out the uplift to the funds, and of course all of that provision is put to Parliament in the annual budget process, which I'm pleased to say last week Parliament approved.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries. I call Jackie Dunbar.
Industry experts have warned that global uncertainty could lead to increased fuel prices. With that in mind, the Labour Party must rethink their planned hikes to fuel duty, which will hit hard-working families in Scotland hard. Does the First Minister believe when Scotland produces far more oil and gas than we can hope to use, energy-rich Scots should not need to pay through the nose to fill their cars?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there is obviously renewed uncertainty about the energy prices that we will all pay because of the events in the Middle East, and that is going to cause significant disruption and anxiety within the economy. Therefore, it is essential that all of us are mindful of the steps that we take to ensure that these issues are properly addressed, and that onus and responsibility is fundamentally on the United Kingdom Government in relation to these areas of taxation. Where we have responsibility, yesterday I was in Inverness announcing the commencement of the £2 bus fare cap proposal, which will be deployed in the Highlands on the 23rd of March. It's already operating in the Western Isles and in Shetland. It will start in Orkney on Monday. It's another example of this government intervening to support individuals to reduce the cost of living, and I'm pleased with the interventions that we're making.
Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I've been contacted by local church groups who have raised concern about the closure at the end of this month of the UK Government's Listed Places of Worship grant scheme, a very valuable scheme I'm sure the First Minister is aware of, that allows places of worship to recover value-added tax on repair and renovation costs. Now, the UK Government has indicated that from April a replacement scheme worth £92 million will be established, which will cover England only. That will, of course, generate Barnett consequentials for the Scottish Government. So, will the First Minister commit to using those Barnett consequentials to establish a similar scheme for listed places of worship here in Scotland?
First Minister.
I'll have to look at the detail of the timing of those announcements, but I suspect the Barnett consequentials that Mr Fraser talks about will have been in the budget settlement that the Parliament determined on in the budget debate last week, in which, of course, Mr Fraser didn't support the government's budget. So we will look at this issue and see what we can do to assist, and obviously if there are further steps the government can take, we'll share those with Parliament.
Pauline McNeill.
The First Minister is aware that there are temporary works on the M8 viaduct and it's already 4 years over schedule, but I want to put on record to thank Amy and Transport Scotland for the site visit that I had. But Transport Scotland are now consulting on 3 options for a permanent solution, and one of them is to demolish the M8, that section of the M8, and divert it to the M74 with a cost of up to £125 million. So I want to ask the First Minister, does he agree that this option would be a disaster, considering the impact on the M74 and the west of Scotland economy, because it's much wider than Glasgow, obviously? And does he agree that Transport Scotland should remove this option and they should reassure businesses, taxis, drivers and buses that this option will not be taken seriously?
First Minister.
I obviously understand the concern that Pauline McNeill raises with me. This is an issue that is the subject of active consultation, and obviously Transport Scotland will consider the feedback that comes, and if there are the concerns that Pauline McNeill has set out, I'm sure we'll hear in the consultation process, and I give her the commitment that the Government will consider very carefully the views that are expressed by all interested parties about this issue.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Labour Party betrayed workers, industry and their economy when they failed to scrap their tax on Scotland's energy at the spring statement this week. Not only does that destroy jobs, it ruins investment in renewables and puts our energy security at risk at a time of escalating global conflict. Does the First Minister share my view that Labour's tax on Scotland's energy must end now, to put us in a position to boost our economy, save jobs and ensure our energy security?
First Minister.
I'm not quite sure why the Labour Party are taking such exception to Mr Stewart's question today. It rather reinforces the lack of concern they have for the employment of people in the North Sea oil and gas sector at the present moment. I've been raising with the Prime Minister for some months now the necessity of removing the energy profits levy, because what we are seeing because of that levy is an accelerated decline in oil and gas without the upsurge in renewables activity that we need to see that being compensated. So there is a significant employment threat faced by people in the North Sea oil and gas sector, and the Labour Party is absolutely oblivious to all of that. They don't care about it one jot. Well, this government does care about the employment of individuals in Scotland. I reiterate my call for the removal of the energy profits levy, and it should happen the sooner the better.
Thank you. Let's make sure that we can hear one another. Those in the gallery would very much like to hear contributions. Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Councillors here in Edinburgh have voted to develop a framework for a congestion charge here in the capital. This could see residents in East Lothian, Mid Lothian and West Lothian having to pay over £4,000 a year to drive into the city. The First Minister says he's interested in cost of living, so can I ask him, does he agree with me that it is unfair for my constituents to pay to drive to work, visit family or go to hospital? And I know he is keen on referenda, so can I ask him, does he agree, like in 2005, this should be decided by a referendum of people across my region?
First Minister.
President Officer, there is a dilemma at the heart of the question that Miles Briggs raises, because on a very regular basis, members of Parliament will press the government to enable local authorities to take more comprehensive decisions about their localities. And here we have Mr Briggs, who I think probably over time has probably argued for me to enable local authorities to have more scope to do things, asking me to intervene and to stop that happening. So these are local matters that local authorities must consult about and decide about. It's their responsibility to do exactly that. What I would say to Mr Briggs on the subject of a referendum, I think the next referendum that needs to take place in Scotland is a referendum on Scottish independence, and again, the sooner the better.
Monica Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It feels like a good time to remind the Chamber and Kevin Stewart in particular that the triple threat of climate breakdown, nature loss and pollution is an urgent danger to our people and environment. Can I thank the First Minister and the Cabinet Secretary for Climate Action and Energy, Gillian Martin in particular, for their support for the Ecocide Scotland Bill, which was recently backed by 90 MSPs from 6 political parties at stage 1. While the Parliamentary Committee, by a majority of 1 vote, has stopped the clock on this bill for this session, the threat to Scotland's nature remains. So does the First Minister agree with me and the majority of people in Scotland that this bill must be a priority for the next session of Parliament so that Scotland can benefit from a standalone offence of ecocide to deter and protect us from the most severe environmental destruction?
First Minister.
So let me begin, first of all, by paying tribute to Monica Lennon for the work that she's done on this particular bill. I understand the committee decided not to proceed to stage 2 consideration, which obviously it's a matter for the committees, the decisions that they take. What I would say is that the issues that Monica Lennon raises about nature loss, biodiversity and climate change are sustained, important priority issues, and they cannot be avoided. So that's why the government is committed to the policy agenda we're committed to, which will obviously, should the government be re-elected, will involve consideration of the issues that Monica Lennon raises with me today. But I think we all have to recognise that there is now a much more divided debate on this question, and it's important that there is leadership deployed to make sure that we address the necessity for climate action and to restore nature loss, and that's what I'm committed to in the programme of my government.
Claire Hockey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I remind members of my register of interests. This week, new figures have shown a 6.1% increase in the number of NHS operations performed in the last year. Meanwhile, CAM's waiting times of over 18 weeks are now at their lowest level since June 2013, with CAM's targets having been met consistently for over a year. And that follows last week's news that waiting lists in Scotland are continuing to fall, with waits of over a year decreasing for 8 consecutive months. Does the First Minister expect continuous improvements to delivery across our National Health Service?
First Minister.
I do expect that to be the case, because the Government has committed itself to reducing long waits in our National Health Service, and we are now seeing, as my colleague Claire Hockey has said, 8 months of continuous reductions in long waits for outpatients and for patients with a treatment time guarantee. Now, the latest data this week shows that operation numbers are up 5.6% in the 12 months to December 2025. GP numbers are up. There are 16 walk-in GP centres being delivered across the country. I know the Labour Party absolutely loathe these GP walk-in centres, but I'm pleased they're going to provide more access to healthcare services in Scotland. The national performance against the 18-week CAM standard has been met for the last year. So I assure Claire Hockey the government under my leadership is going to continue to deliver the improvements in the National Health Service. We're going to continue doing what we've already got in place.
Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding officer, this week Brewdog, based in Ellon in Aberdeenshire, announced the loss of 484 jobs and the closure of 38 pubs after the company fell into administration. 9 of these bars that have closed are in Scotland, including 2 in Aberdeen and 1 in Inverurie. Unions, workers and investors have all voiced anger at how the sale of the business was handled, with staff being told they had lost their jobs during a 15-minute conference call. First Minister, Brewdog is the latest in a string of pubs to have closed in the North East so far this year, with its former chief executive pointing to business rates as a factor in the company's downfall. So can I ask, what is the Scottish Government doing to support staff who have now lost their jobs at Brewdog? And when will he finally put a stop to this SNP stealth tax on our hospitality sector?
First Minister.
I think, with the greatest respect to Mr Lumsden, I think the issues in relation to Brewdog's situation have got a great deal more to do with other factors than they do with business rates levied by the Scottish Government. But on the question of business rates, the Government has, of course, in the budget that was passed last week, which Mr Lumsden didn't support, we put in place support and reliefs totalling, if my memory serves me right, over £900 million in relation to business rates relief. We are also supporting transitional relief as part of that figure to assist businesses in the hospitality sector. The Government will, of course, engage closely with the employees. I'm deeply concerned about the way in which Brewdog employees have been treated. I think it's an appalling way for members of staff to be treated in this fashion. And the Partnership Action for Continuing Employment initiative that the Government puts in place to support any employees that lose their jobs will be available to help those from Brewdog that have lost their jobs.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I met with a constituent last Friday who was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2018. She's had successful treatment for a mastectomy, chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and she was assured she would receive breast reconstruction surgery following treatment, and that will likely involve multiple visits from Shetland to Aberdeen Breast Clinic, but she's thus far failed to establish when this will happen. It's evident the lengthy delay is impacting her own mental health and well-being, and consequently that of her family. Does the First Minister know if years of delay for breast reconstruction surgery is usual, and can he ask his Health Secretary to engage directly with me about this specific case in order to try and get some answers for my constituent who's already been through so much?
First Minister.
I'm very sympathetic to the point that Beatrice Wishart raises, and I have answered some questions on this topic before, and I will ask the Health Secretary to engage directly with Beatrice Wishart on this question. Obviously, the same theatres that are undertaking activity to essentially tackle the issues of breast cancer and other cancers would be the theatres used for breast reconstruction surgery. And the clinical priority has been attached where we have such backlogs in the aftermath of COVID to the immediate treatment of the life-threatening conditions that individuals face. That has, sadly and regrettably from my point of view, led to significant delays in breast reconstruction surgery. So that's the rationale for where we find ourselves, but I will ask the Health Secretary to engage directly with Beatrice Wishart to support her constituency, and I simply express my regret and apologies for the delay that has been experienced, but it's for those reasons and those reasons alone.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. Our next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Jeremy Balfour, and there will be a brief suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.
Thank you. Could I ask those members of the public who have come to visit us today to, and of course you're most very welcome, but to please, if you're leaving the chamber, to do so quickly and quietly, because we are now about to move on to our next item of business. Thank you. Thank you. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 20598 in the name of Jeremy Balfour on recognising lived experience and strengthening disabled people's representation in Scottish democracy. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Jeremy Balfour to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to colleagues across the chamber for their support for today's motion. I am, of course, sad that it's not gained the support of all parties in this Parliament. I do hope that's not a commitment or comment of their support for disabled representation, as it's an issue that I'm sure all reasonable members can agree is worthy of parliamentary time. Can I say gently to my former colleagues that for none of them to support this motion, I think reflects on the party that I no longer recognise in regard to disability, and for two other parties to feel disability is not important enough to even be in the chamber, I think says of where we are and where we still have to go. Presiding Officer, the core of this motion is laid out in the first line of this afternoon's motion, that the Parliament recognises the value of lived experience in informing effective scrutiny and legislation, and ensuring that those views are embedded across legislation passed at the Scottish Parliament. If we hold this to be true, then we owe it to the people of Scotland we serve to make a conscious effort to ensure that the Parliament looks as similar to the people it serves as possible. Now, can I say, in the time that I've been here, we have made progress. We have seen changes in legislation which gives greater protection to those with disabilities. We have seen the Scottish Government pick up the challenge around change-in-place toilets. We have seen more money go to disability charities. But there are still some major issues here we face. I received an email just this morning. This is what it said. Glasgow IJB ended its funding for Scottish Huntington's Association to provide specialist services on 1st January, a decision condemned by cross-party MSPs and further called into question by Glasgow City internal audit. One thing is beyond dispute. Huntington's families were not consulted. A decision was made about this community without its knowledge or input. This should not be so. And there are, I think, still those with certain disabilities, perhaps learning disabilities, hidden disabilities, which are still not getting the coverage and help and support that they deserve and require. The issue around employability, we are still seeing too many people, again, particularly with learning disabilities, not getting the employment that they want and are capable of doing. And can I say, I do think this Parliament missed the opportunity to appoint a Disability Commissioner. I understand the arguments brought by some, but I think the disability community are still struggling to come to terms with it. But to be more positive for a moment, Deputy Presiding Officer, a couple of Saturdays ago, myself and the Minister and Pam Duncan-Glance and Emma Roddick and Carol Motkin had the Disability Summit here in Parliament. Events like this help to inform policy and decisions. This event was a great success. Every desk almost was filled with people with lived experience of disability. I'm pleased that it has continued into its second year, and I hope that whoever comes back after the election, that this will become a biannual event. But while events like this are vitally important in making the voices of disabled people heard, they unfortunately don't come along enough. I think one of the things we have to look at in regard to the Disability Summit is what outcomes came from it and what real difference will it make to the lives of those with disability. Now, as I said, there had been progress made in representation across protected characteristics, even during my 10 years here. But we must recognise that we still have a significant way to go. There are 5% of MSPs that have declared a disability in this Parliament. And yet in Scotland, 25% of people have a recognised disability. This difference is obviously, I think, unacceptable and needs to be something done about it. And let me be absolutely clear, I'm not blaming the electorate. I am here thanks to the people of Lothian. Other members that have disabilities are proof that people in Scotland are not against electing members with a disability. The issue seems to me that there's not enough being done to encourage disabled candidates to stand. Now, I understand that this is a somewhat cheeky point to make now that I'm sitting as an independent, but having been a member of a party for 40 years, I do think all parties across this chamber and out with this chamber need to do much more to attract those into their own parties. Encouraging and promoting disabled candidates must start at the grassroots, and parties should be doing everything in their power to make the selection process as accessible as possible. But actually, I think it goes beyond that, because what do we expect of our members? I'll give it away.
I thank the member for taking the intervention. Do you not think the list system in the Scottish Parliament would be a great way for the parties to emphasise that disabled people could get up there higher on the list system within the party system and giving them priority?
Chairman Butler.
Can I thank the member for interest? I mean, I think it is a debate that needs to happen. I mean, interesting, if you look at other Commonwealth countries, they have gone even more radically that. So if we look at some of the East African countries, they have disabled-only lists, so you have to have a disability to be on that list. Now, it's competitive amongst different individuals. That is one model. But if we look, for example, in South Africa, they have gone much more looking at political parties and getting them to have more disabled candidates. But there are things such as, is delivering leaflets an essential to be a member and a possible candidate? How is our access to buildings? These type of issues need to be addressed by all political parties. Again, we have made progress. The access to elected office fund is something that is being put into legislation and will go forward both for Scottish Parliament elections and for local elections. And I do hope the UK Government will look at the scheme for Westminster elections. This allows disabled people to have the help and resources available to them to make it an even playing field. The administration of this has been very helpful, and I know I and other members within this chamber have benefited from it. I think one of the fears, Deputy Presiding Officer, that people have about standing is, well, if I get elected, what will the Parliament be like? Can I talk and say, from my own experience, this Parliament, and having worked in many different roles over my years, is one of the best places to work for disabled people. I have found from every individual that has worked here a willingness to be helpful, to be kind, and to be open to suggestions. And let me say that if disabled people are worried about being elected, they need not, because the Parliament, from the Chief Executive downwards, have done more than I could have ever hoped in regard to making that from my day one. To close, Presiding Officer, this may be my last long speech before the election. I, like all of us, do not know how the electorate will vote come May. But I think there needs to be a simple message that is picked up by whoever is elected after May. And that is nothing for us without us. Parliament cannot make decisions on what is best for disabled people. Mr
Balfour, you will need to bring your back to
if disabled people are not here. If a Parliament is to serve the people effectively, it must reflect the people effectively. As the motion says, it is the job of political parties, the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government to drive progress forward. I hope that will be taken up, whoever is elected.
Thank you, Mr. Balfour.
After me. Thank you.
Could I just advise members that we really, now I give the members some latitude, but we're starting again at 2. The security personnel must be allowed the time to come in and clear the chamber, and therefore we're moving to the open debate. It is backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes, and I would intend to ensure that members comply with that. And I call Emma Harper to be followed by Alexandra Stewart. Ms Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome today's debate and I thank Jeremy Balfour for bringing this motion before Parliament today, which I supported. And I agree with much of what Jeremy Balfour has said today, and I didn't realise this might be one of his last speeches in this chamber. Strengthening disabled people's representation is not a peripheral issue. It is central to building a democratic system that works for everyone. Lived experience enriches our scrutiny, improves our legislation and ensures that policy is grounded in the reality of people's lives. Throughout my time in this Parliament, particularly through my work on health inequalities, diabetes and lung health, I have seen firsthand how crucial lived experience is to good policy making. As co-convener of the cross-party group on diabetes and lung health, I've had the privilege of hearing directly from people managing long-term conditions, many of them invisible, many of them misunderstood. Their insights have shaped our understanding of the challenges they face and the actions needed to tackle them. This reinforces while people who are living with a disability, including those living with hidden conditions, must be included at every stage of political and policy development. Their exclusion has consequences, real measurable consequences. Presiding Officer, misunderstanding continues to be one of the greatest barriers faced by people with hidden disabilities. A person living with type 1 diabetes may struggle with glucose levels and the glucose levels can change sometimes unpredictably. I know this because I'm one of those type 1s. Someone with COPD or severe asthma may live each day managing breathlessness. Yet because these conditions are not visible, many people feel judged, doubted or dismissed when they ask for support that they need. The stigma stops people from participating fully in society, and it prevents far too many people from considering roles in public life. Raising awareness of these challenges has been an important part of my work, whether during debates such as World COPD Day or World Diabetes Day, and through engagement with communities across my South Scotland region. But awareness alone is not enough. We need structural change. I therefore welcome the Scottish Government's efforts to embed disabled people's voices into policy making, including through the Disability Equality Plan. Developed in co-production with disabled people's organisations, the plan commits to building disability competence across government and includes targeted investment to address long-standing barriers. Initiatives supported by the Alliance, such as strengthened mental health support, improved advice services and the Cabinet takeovers by disabled people's organisations, with the most recent happening in February, demonstrate a growing commitment to meaningful engagement. Presiding Officer, representation matters deeply. Disabled people remain significantly underrepresented in elective office, not because of lack of ability or ambition, but because of the barriers that are collectively faced, and these barriers need to be removed. The Access to Elected Office Fund, created by the Scottish Government and delivered by Inclusion Scotland, has shown what is possible when proper support is provided. We must continue to build on that progress. The evidence is clear. Disabled people face higher levels of poverty, poorer health outcomes and barriers in employment, housing and education. These inequalities intersect with other protected characteristics. That alone makes the case for ensuring people who have a disability help shape the policies that directly affect them. Presiding Officer, empowering disabled people strengthens our democracy and leads to fairer, more compassionate decisions. So I welcome the cross-party commitment that we will have here today, and I reaffirm my own commitment to working with colleagues and communities to remove barriers and support full and equal participation in Scotland's political life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Harper. I call Alexander Stewart to be followed by Carol Mocking. Mr Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to speak in this afternoon's debate and thank Jeremy Balfour for bringing the issue to the Chamber. The motion for today's debate speaks on the simple but important principle that lived experience can strengthen our democracy. While statistics and political theory are no doubt important for making policy, Presiding Officer, however, we cannot, and that cannot be the only thing that influences how a Parliament decides on law. Legislation must also be informed by the experiences of those who the decisions affect. That is why we support politicians who have a variety of life experiences which can improve the choices they make. It's also why we should support the inclusion of groups who are underrepresented in politics. This is why initiatives such as the Parliament's Disability Summit are so important, as today's motion highlights. The summit demonstrates clearly how the political debate improves when underrepresented groups, including disabled people, are fully involved with the wider political debate, Presiding Officer. Jeremy Balfour's motion speaks about disabled people are underrepresented in Scottish politics, and that is a trend that's happening in the United Kingdom, across Europe and in the United States. In a study in 2024, it found that disabled people both in the UK and the US feel better represented by disabled candidates. That has driven parties not only to seek and to share identity, but also to feel it's better represented by candidates who share their disability. The study also gave evidence that non-disabled people are also seen political candidates are bringing a range of traits and skills to the table. And that's important when we look at things. The party also results in different life experiences for disabled candidates can offer, and we know that already. This remains and reminds us that the need to tackle the remaining barriers that discourage and prevent disabled people from participating in politics. This should help unlock the potential that many individuals can offer to the political system. This includes such as the Access to Elected Office Fund run by Inclusion Scotland. This should also go alongside continued efforts to tackle other inequalities disabled people face in a day-to-day within their lives. For example, we know that the number of disabled people in employment has increased over the decade, but it's still very short when it comes to those who have employment. As we understand, groups across society tackle one of the equalities are often tackling alongside that. Presiding Officer, all across this chamber, we agree that the Parliament should fully reflect Scotland and what Scotland represents. That means we must be committed to removing unnecessary barriers for inclusion, and that includes in our political system if we truly want to be inclusive. These include disabled people, but also include many other demographics who remain underrepresented across politics as a whole. Lived experience should not sit on the margins of discussion. It should be recognised as a part and effective scrutiny of popular lawmaking. Therefore, in conclusion, Presiding Officer, promoting inclusion and ensuring that there's diverse
across our political issues and across the political divide is vitally important. And this chamber should be grounded in that, in the realisation that everyday lives across Scotland are affected by it. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I now call Cara Mochan to be followed by